For us, in the Sherpa community, we've grown up since children with this issue that has been at the back of our minds, knowing relatives that have been going up these mountains and knowing that they might not come back. And so when Jen Peetham approached me a few years ago to do a small interview, I said, sure, anything to help, to let the world know the challenges and the difficulties we face, especially these days with the risks and inequities that you see bear in this film. I felt that Jen Peetham really did an excellent job, along with Renan, in really conveying all of the issues that are close to us that we haven't been able to speak out very much about. And for me, at least, since the first ascent of Everest, when my father climbed with Ed Hillary, this is the most important film.
Renan, would you explain to the audience, because I don't know, what does a high-altitude director do? I mean...
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's not a lot of those titles in a lot of the films that are out there. But I guess there's a weird cross-section between athletes and artists and this type of filmmaking these days. And yeah, a lot of our film crew actually got sick at altitude, and there's only a few of us that kept working to drive the story along. And that was a big part of it, just taking what we had in modern camera technology and making a film that documented this really hard moment, but also tried to do it in a beautiful way.
What cameras did you use?
Yeah, we had some bigger Arri Alexas and things like that, but we ended up mostly using the red camera because it was all we could physically carry, running across the rocks and bringing it up to some of the high points.
Were the Sherpas given cameras as well?
Yeah, so a big part of the process of making this film was also empowering some of the younger Sherpas in the community and teaching them how to use cameras, because they could be the only ones who could get that intimate perspective and get some of those shots in the icefall. So that was really beautiful to see. We carried our own cameras, but they also carried their own, and there's this constant learning going back and forth, and we're still mentoring some of those same budding Sherpa filmmakers as well.
That's fantastic. Norbu, since the making and the release of the film, do you think people have changed their minds, or the status of the Sherpa has increased? Are people now seeing the Sherpa for what he does?
I think a film or documentary of this kind really does tremendous justice to explain to the general public who we are. We are a group of people who migrated from eastern Tibet some 500 years ago and just happened to land on the shoulders of Everest, growing potatoes, and early Himalayan climbers came in the early 1900s looking for people to help carry their things, and that's how we got into this business. But this project of this nature is very, very helpful. And I think in the last 2 years at least, I've seen there's much more awareness of what's going on Everest. There's much more awareness of what the issues that are faced by our folks. So the work that Renan has been doing over the past couple of years is really valuable in letting the world know that Sherpas are actually people, we're an ethnic group, just happen to be great climbers. And now Hollywood has to be careful because we have good filmmakers coming up too.
And I wondered, what were the most difficult shots for you, and were the most difficult shots the most aesthetically pleasing for you?
Yeah, it's a hard question. And it was such, in these types of films, you just feel like an asshole sometimes when you're pointing the camera in the face of people who have had that kind of loss. And they're your friends, and they don't want you pointing the cameras in those moments. So especially going into the homes of some of the widows was really hard, even though physically there are much harder shots, staying up all night for time lapses at 20,000 feet, freezing your fingers, that's fine. But when you have to have the cultural awareness and respect to go into someone's house holding a child that doesn't have a father anymore, it was really hard. But you know, the fact that we were there in the first place to tell this story, you never could have expected what happened, but at the same time it illustrated a lot of the inequities that were there.
And some of the shots of Everest, I haven't seen the fictional Everest, but it sure didn't look like this. This was so overwhelmingly beautiful, the shots of the mountain and the clouds, the night, etc.
Yeah, it's an incredibly beautiful place, yeah.
And Norbu, could you explain the religious aspects of Mount Everest? I'd never heard that before about the goddess, etc.
You know, nature is very spiritual for Sherpas. Sherpas are quite religious people. We are Buddhist by religion, and high mountain passes, mountains, places where we call Payul. Payul are sacred places for us, and Mount Everest, the real name is Chomolungma, which is Mother Goddess of the world, and therein is the deity Myolungsungma resides on Everest. And for us, we are, like my brother said, walking into the lap of the deity, and one must be very respectful of places like this, and there are other sacred places like Mount Kailash in Tibet, which is not climbable. Just like mountains, there are rivers, there are valleys that are very sacred, where our deities, our gods, I guess, in centuries past have passed and left their footprints on.
And when he comes back to his village, there are these cylinders that he runs his hands across, and I wondered, do those have a religious significance?
Yeah, those are called prayer wheels, and prayer wheels all over the Himalayas. When you cross a house or cross a pass, you see these prayer wheels, and essentially what they are is they have prayers inside of them. So when you brush them with your hand, your prayers are being transmitted to the gods. And the flags that you saw that he was raising, we call them lungtas. Lungta literally translates into lung is wind, and ta is horse. So it's a wind horse, where these flags are raised so that the prayers go up to the gods. And you would notice in the film that the Sherpas always have some kind of a ceremony ahead of time, and divinations are taken quite often on what the conditions are going to be, and we're quite superstitious that way, and those decisions many times have saved many of our folks.